My name is Ginger Gossman, and you are tuned in to the webinar hosted by the Texas Education Coordinating Board on our new Higher Education Strategic Plan 60x30TX. This webinar is specifically about marketable skills, so I hope that you all have questions for us and maybe some suggestions for strategies for the new plan. What we're going to do is show you a brief video that provides an overview for the entire plan, and we will introduce ourselves, those of us who are here in the room, and open it up for questions. That if you do ask questions, you'll notice on your panel that you have an option for chat or you have an option for Q&A. It's a lot easier for us if you just use the Q&A panel. We would very much appreciate that. So I wanted to let you know that there are two ways to hear the audio for this presentation. You can hear your phone by dialing in, and you can also hear it over your computer. Sometimes if you're listening through your computer, the sound might get garbled. Just wanted to let you know you can mute your system and still dial in and hear the audio much more clearly. Okay, we will get with our video.
The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is in the process of developing the state's next long-term strategic plan for higher education. The success of achieving the goals of this plan is going to rest heavily on collaboration among higher education, public education, and the workforce. We need to work together much more closely than ever before. The current strategic plan for Texas higher education, Closing the Gaps by 2015, is coming to an end this year. It has been a very successful plan for the past 15 years. Accomplishments during Closing the Gaps up to 2014 include the following. Over 2.6 million students completed a certificate, associate, or bachelor's. Second, Texas public institutions invested $42.8 billion in research and development, supported by federal, state, local, institutional, and private sources. Third, state legislators allocated $3.3 billion in Texas grants to support low-income students in higher education. Fourth, close to 170,000 students graduated with nursing degrees, and nearly 126,000 students graduated with engineering degrees. These are all graduates contributing to high-demand fields that might not have without the initiatives that came out of Closing the Gaps. We are looking forward to the next 15 years as we design a plan that establishes a globally competitive workforce in Texas by 2030. In March 2014, the Coordinating Board created the Higher Education Strategic Planning Committee, which is comprised of education and business leaders from across Texas. This committee is collaborating with Coordinating Board staff on the development of the next higher education plan for the state. Since then, the committee has received expert testimony from individuals from across the state, the U.S., and from around the world. The final plan will be presented to the Coordinating Board on July 23rd for adoption. The new draft plan, 60x30TX, is firmly founded on the critical need that Texas produces an educated workforce that is able to adapt to change and compete at the highest levels, nationally and internationally. The world's most competitive workforces have younger populations with more education compared to the U.S. and compared to Texas. 60x30TX emphasizes all forms of post-high school education, from certificates to associate and bachelor's degrees to graduate and professional education. It also highlights the overarching goal that 50% of Generation Texas will have a post-secondary credential or degree by 2030. 60x30TX will build on the success of Closing the Gaps. We don't expect work that began with Closing the Gaps to end. We expect those accomplishments will continue, and that 60x30TX is the beginning of a new series of accomplishments. We anticipate this pattern of building on successes will be true well into the future. The strategic Planning Committee has developed 4 student-centered goals. The first deals with educational attainment, which is a fraction of the Texas population actually holding a degree or certificate. The second goal deals with degree and certificate completion at Texas colleges and universities. The third goal highlights the need for students to know they have marketable skills. The fourth goal recognizes the need to address student debt. First and overarching goal is, by 2030, at least 60% of Texans ages 25 to 34 will have a post-secondary credential or degree. This is a big percentage to shoot for because right now, only about 38% of Texans in this age group have any kind of post-school degree or certificate. The best educated societies in the world have already reached 60%, or close to it, in this age group. This includes our northern neighbor and international competitor, Canada. We need to move the level of attainment up dramatically among young Texans. The new plan calls for realistic interim targets and strategies that will get to our final goal if we stay on course through 2030. Critical to achievement is a focus on and success in improving the education level of young Hispanic Texans, who will make up a majority of the students in school between now and 2030. The 60 by 30 goal important. There has been a huge increase in the percentage of jobs that require some form of post-secondary education or training. In 1973, only 28% of all jobs required education beyond a high school diploma. According to the Center on Education and the Workforce at Georgetown University, 65% of all jobs will require post-secondary education by 2018, including 59% of all jobs in Texas. The simple truth is that the 21st century workforce will require more education and more skills, not less, and the competition globally will be tough. These projections are a key reason why the Coordinating Board is pursuing funding strategies and other higher education initiatives designed to better align higher education with the workforce and boost the production of post-secondary educated workers. The next goal reads, by 2030, at least 550,000 students in that year will complete a certificate, associate, bachelor's, or master's from a Texas public, independent, or for-profit college or university. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics make clear that students don't get much of an economic lift from college attendance unless they complete a degree or certificate. We can do better at this than what we're doing now. Under Closing the Gaps, Texas has been able to generate impressive growth in degree and certificate production. We need to continue that record. The plan includes targets for Hispanic Texans earning 285,000 certificates or degrees in 2030. The plan includes other specific targets, and we encourage everyone to read through these carefully. Another important target is to increase the percentage of students who enroll in higher education directly after high school from the current 53% to 65%. The third goal reads, by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions of higher education will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. The goal calls every institution in Texas to articulate how it prepares students to succeed after completion. All programs develop skills of value in the marketplace. The plan requires institutions to formally identify those skills for each of its programs so that students are aware of and can communicate these skills to future employers. By 2030, undergraduate student loan debt will not exceed 60% of first-year wage for graduates of Texas public institutions. We have an opportunity to balance student loan debt and improve how higher education is financed to reduce financial barriers that students and families encounter when pursuing any level of higher education. We think the best way to focus on financial issues is to set the goal of maintaining debt load as measured against student earning power at graduation. Success will require collaboration among elected officials and higher education leaders, and will probably require imaginative reinvention of paths for students and methods for teaching and learning. Our 60x30 text plan must be bold. If we aren't bold, we will lose ground in having an educated population. If we lose ground, we will lose our competitive edge in the global marketplace. This will affect institutions and their students. Great universities are built by great economies. Projected personal income will not keep pace with inflation or with the cost of living. 60x30 text plan is bold. It rests on careful assessments of the possible. We have set challenging goals and targets to meet the genuine needs of Texas and Texans by 2030. We need everyone to review the plan and provide comment before it is sent to the coordinating board for approval. We have an online tool for stakeholders called College Town Hall Texas that enables you to participate in the discussion. This interactive website is hosted by the coordinating board and provides an opportunity to share ideas, respond to new initiatives, and join the dialogue on the future of higher education in the state. Stakeholders, including you, legislators, business leaders, faculty, administrators, students, parents, and educators can help shape future policy as Texas works to become a national and international leader in higher education. The question and answer session will begin shortly. Thank you.
Overview. So what I'd like for us to do now is introduce ourselves so you know who's speaking. You ask us questions, which again, please do over your Q&A chat bar. My name is Ginger Gossman. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation and Policy Development.
Assistant Committee of Equality and Workforce.
Julie, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding.
Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy.
Susan, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding.
Bill Booker, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of College Readiness.
Paul Brown, Director, Strategic Planning and Funding.
So I'd like to invite you to ask questions. We're really interested in respond to any you have about the plan. We'll talk about the marketable skills goal specifically.
Walk through the marketable skills and some of the targets and strategies. The marketable skills goal reads that by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions of higher education will have completed programs of identified marketable skills. The first, really just rolling out this goal, so that by 2020 we anticipate that everyone will have implemented, meaning that institutions will have created a process to identify skills, implemented that process, and also identified the skills related to each of their programs.
you planning to communicate this goal with the industry? Need their support.
Important strategies.
I'm going to go to our strategies, try and answer the question.
Specific strategies that deal with the issue, and you'll notice that one talks about convening a statewide advisory group. We're not sure that advisory group is the most appropriate language for this, but we do envision some statewide conversation that involves institutions, industry to talk about what are marketable skills industry and business are looking for, at least in terms at this level. You'll notice that there is a second strategy there that deals with collaboration among institutions and stakeholders at probably a more local or regional level, engage in a conversation about specific marketable skills that specific industry businesses, particular to a region or locality, are looking for.
Yeah, this is David Garner. With the statewide group, I tend to think as a learning community, and I don't think it should be an environment in which industry is just saying this is what you need to do. I think it needs to be a conversation. I work with industry that they can't always tell you specifically really what they need. I think they need to get feedback from institutions. I think it's a means to work together to try to realize what some of the goals are and how to better identify what they're looking for. And then, like I said, the research can get down to more specifics. I think that can build to a large extent on what communities in particular already do.
Junior, feel free to send us a follow-up. Oh, you're welcome. Some information on the second associated with marketable skills, and that will maintain the percentage of graduates employed or enrolled the fall after completing a degree. It's about 80%, and it has been roughly 80% for a number of years. We really, again, just want to maintain this over time. To monitor the market and anticipate that if this changes, and it's just, it will, that we need to learn what's happening in the field. So it may decrease, and that is a quest that we need to figure out what's going on, or increase, which also would alert us that something changed in the market, and we should understand what that is.
We understand that there is some variability across institutions in terms of this target, and we understand that and feel that that's appropriate. Some institutions have more students who go to school, perhaps out of state. We see for community colleges, their percentages tend to be higher. Graduates tend to be more likely to remain working locally or regionally. So we do understand that there is variation there, and we're looking at this from a statewide perspective.
And you'll note, we still count people who continue into graduate school in this year. We just, as Julie said, in terms of those going out of state. It's also important to note, as staffing at the coordinating board, we're going to have additional focus on marketplace. We've already, as we have extensive data available through Texas Crew and other sites in terms of actually the wages of students once they leave school, if they're in Texas, and we have a very high match rate for if you to Austin, our match rate isn't as high. Because they're going to other parts of the country, world, and also going to graduate school in larger numbers out of state. So we're in with the committees discussed that in great detail.
Okay. Come in. Our College of Humanities and Social Sciences is really struggling with this goal. Any recommendations on how we should address their concerns?
First of all, we believe that regardless of the major that they exit college with skills and knowledge that are not necessarily explicitly known to them, and at this point may not be explicitly known to their departments. And so, you know, part of what we're asking people to do is to look at programs and make some determination about what kind of skills, in addition to the subject matter knowledge that they get from their particular major, what else are they learning along the way, so to speak, that can actually be broadly applicable in the workplace. And in social sciences, I'll give you an example from my own background. All my degrees are in political science and government. And the things that I did was I took a fair amount of statistics in a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. And the things that I learned, although in the, you know, those courses, so to speak, all the examples and the applications that we did were science and nature. The matter is that what I learned is actually broadly applicable to all kinds of situations. And so one would argue that while I was getting this degree in the social sciences or degrees in social sciences, I also picked up a marketable skill of being able to use statistics in some way. And so that would be an example of sort of a hard skill, if you will. And so we believe that students, regardless of their major, are either picking up soft or hard skills as these things that are either an integral part of what they're learning, but be made explicitly known to them by the department, and are they're complementary to the degrees that they're picking up. And I think in some respects this is somewhat like the idea that people have been going through with student learning outcomes over the last 15 or 20 years. And the idea was first broached. A lot of people kind of did the idea, and then but surely began to realize that they've actually been trained to teach people something all along. Things can be called student learning outcomes that you want people to walk away from the program with. So eventually people began to identify those things in their programs that had not been made explicit before. We believe that marketable skills are much the same.
And one thing we usually mention first is that Andrew's been saying for 3 decades, the three things you need are critical thinking skills, ability to communicate, and ability to work well with others. That graduates from college, humanities, and social sciences, graduates probably have those very well developed. They probably do not think of them as marketable skills. And these are things industry wants to have. This is helping students not only do, see these things that Rex was mentioning, but to realize how these and the marketable skills, but how to market them in opportunities in fields you not realize are there. I talked to a young woman about a year ago that was graduating in English from the University of Texas at Austin, and she was telling me about a session she was going to for, I don't know if they're just people in liberal arts or English majors, but it had to do with opportunity in the health institutions. And one thing that she had looked at people in control that hired English majors because they needed people who could write and communicate clearly. And curiosity, I went to their website and found it was true. And so these are just the things that people would not think about. We live in a day and age where you get a degree that leads directly to a job. That's not all that higher education is about. And we think it's important that all areas have an expectation of getting a good job. And this is a way to find the opportunity for the students, but at the same time maintaining the important thought in higher education that don't have job connections, such as political science, such as English, anthropology, other areas. Actually, a staff member told me recently, who was a sociology graduate, that she started focusing on the fact that she had research skills on her resume rather than the degree. And Kiplinger was talking about majors having research skills that were sought by industry, but they need to be able to know to market themselves. And we know in sociology there are fields such as marketing, human resources, other areas that some majors thrive. But we need to give students a little bit more help. This is about help. One other thing I'd like to add is that Mark Schneider from AIR pointed out that there's nobody would think of as marketable skills, but is the ability to use Excel, the ability to use PowerPoint of all things, some X database in addition to the stats. Rex was mentioning these are things that many students develop, and they can develop those skills further. And it's a matter of cases how might one use these at the same time you're teaching something else. So there's great opportunity. I understand why it's hard to cope with it, but I think there was a day when, if you looked at the Department of Labor statistics, that a huge percentage of the CEOs had history degrees. That was before everyone decided to major in business, but there's still a significant place for liberal arts majors and social science majors. This is pep talk.
In response back, we were thinking about an industry mentorship program across colleges if funded. Are you aware if this may be one of the best practices?
Yeah, that's really terrific. I visited a liberal arts school in Connecticut about years ago. Emphasized interests. They emphasized summer. These are things that you need to work through, and to mentors can open the door. Say from personal experience, my daughter, who goes to a liberal college, received an email from the department at the end of her year in the summer, which gave her a list of multiple graduates of, it happens to be a sociology and anthropology major, graduates of that department who are in a wide range of industries and professions that had volunteered themselves to for the graduate went through. I think it's interesting that co-ops are beginning to come back. Co-ops were fairly standard years ago, and actually in engineering programs, but they've gone away. The liberal arts program at that particular school actually had multiple co-ops with NASA. I thought was interesting. They actually had co-op opportunities at NASA for English majors. So I think you're onto something very important, and part of what we need to do is for schools to share just with each other. And we don't think that every school necessarily the exactly same way, and I think you can fit best within your own resources and within the culture of your institution.
And we know we've just recently revisited our data on mentorships, and students who receive those intervention do just as well or close to as well as students who find a financial aid. Relative to types of financial aid, they perform very, very well. So you're not just helping your students in terms of marketable skills. You offer mentorship programs. You are also contributing towards the completion goal. So that's a really good way to approach.
And we're interested in how you might develop this. And so if there are things you'd like to share and progress in developing industry mentoring programs, would be very interested in learning from you. You've been thinking about at your campuses in terms of how to develop this goal. This might be a good time to do that.
it may be a little bit that we think about this, and then perhaps for us to collaborate with the institutions to figure out some way to make sure that this information is shared. You know, it does sort of remind me of the whole effectiveness approach. And when assessment was first approached, 25 or 30 years ago or so, and it's still day one, but as it may, there's been a long struggle with this, but that if you sort of around the country and you look around the state, there's increasing agreement on best practices in this, but it's a long time to get there, and it took a conversation and a lot of sharing among institutions to figure this out, and at least I sort of envision this is one of those same kinds of things where people share information with each other and talk about how are they doing this, and then borrow from each other. And it's in 2 years, this may be a more settled, more established practice. I recognize that this is something that, at least in this state, is primarily in its infancy. And so we look forward to working with people and having work with each other.
One shared with me that at this, they're begun to develop marketable skills. The way I heard it, I may have misinterpreted. I could see this as having the potential that students could receive this and one could go through and not necessarily associated directly with the program, but say if they worked with a mentorship, if they worked with Kmart, and developed some of these skills, they could essentially keep a running list and some examples for themselves of what they learned to do would be them for when they go forward, something that would be on the student end. And she'd be willing to share that. I haven't seen that, but would help the students some things they might take for granted that are in fact a job, and it would make them read a job differently, with realizing that it actually develops some of these skills. I thought that was real interesting.
Several things, but make pockets. We are trying to create inventory and connect the dots.
Successful in doing that. We're hoping that in implementing the new plan at institutional level that it will overcome silos that happen to emerge over time, and that you'll work together to accomplish all of the 4 goals. But certainly in regards to marketable skills, we'd like for you to other interdepartment conversations could be really valuable for this. So glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
Share something about the process you're using to create an inventory. I know it's early, but that might be helpful to others. About what they're doing at University of Kent, how they're changing this?
So University of Kent is in the United Kingdom, and a staff person came across their work a few months ago when we were digging deep into understanding marketable skills. They have really institutionalized the process of developing marketable skills, identifying them, and sharing them with the students, and also institutionalized the process of updating them regularly. So it's become their campus culture. It's a very interesting model because within each department that we have a specialist that works on marketable skills to make sure that they're integrated into the program, that they're integrated into curricula, and this person, resource within each department is an monster. They're not walking around saying, you have to do this. They're walking around saying, how can I help you? So we created an internal resource for each department, and also these market specialists, I'll call them, also talk to each other. So another way to sort of overcome silos, to try to have a campus-wide conversation about this. So it also have some processes to monitor activities, which we are looking towards them for on how we might do that in Texas, because really no one else is doing this that we are able to find it in the U.S. So it's exciting, as Rex also mentioned, daunting, but it is exciting as well. And we are very interested and curious to hear how you implement this goal, and maybe we can fold that into what we're learning from the University of Kent to create something that will be beneficial to students and any type of burden for institutions.
We're hoping we can do is to find a funder that might be interested in courses for the coordinating board, and maybe three institutions are interested in to look at some way or some models for doing this to help other folks bring them to talk about this. We don't know if we'll be able to enable that, but we do think this is the type of thing where everybody works together, and it's a competitive thing, and there isn't only one model for doing it. Just want to emphasize that when I asked about Kent, it's not because they are the school that has it all figured out. And there's an intensity there that I'm not sure that we could match, but I think there are some things to learn from looking at them, and it's possible, and very well.
Okay. Here's another response. This is a response, yes. I am tasked with updating and revising the university's strategic plan through the process of shared governance. I'm trying to incorporate the 60x30 strategic plan at the institution level, and put inventory together is one of the strategies.
And I think you'll have some lessons to teach the rest of us, but it would be good to provide, some feedback resources if you want. Stay out of it as well. but no, I mean that's very important that you do that, and I think that shows that you're taking a strategic planning approach at your institution, because you're taking into account the state goals, and you've got to deal with the reality of the stakeholders on your own campus, and congratulations on that approach.
Any other questions? Let me talk about a couple that I've gotten over the last month or so. Different venues. A comment about a meeting I attended yesterday, and one of the questions I've been asked is what connection between marketable skills and student outcomes. And I was explicitly asked that, I believe, at a UEAC meeting. Something.
The Undergrad Education
Advisory Committee. But at any rate, I think there is a connection, because, as most of you well know, programs have long been asked to identify student outcomes. I believe some of those student learning outcomes are certainly marketable skills in and of themselves. And it's easy to identify in programs like engineering or accounting. It's less what they might be in political science, as we mentioned before, but embedded within those student learning outcomes, listed in those, and are complementary to those student learning outcomes, may very well be marketable skills that at the program level, in terms of creating any major, we just don't talk about them very often. But it is that in the student learning outcomes associated with becoming an anthropologist, there are marketable skills embedded in those. And so we think there's probably a much than you might realize at first glance. The question I've gotten is this connection to the marketable skills goal and the current requirement to embed the course in the core curriculum and test those things at that level. So 3 of the 6 core objectives are communications, critical thinking, and teamwork, which, as Dr. mentioned earlier, are the 3 that are most mentioned by business and industry as this is what they want graduates to have. And in fact, when the core curriculum was revised, one of the things that the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee looked at was what business and industry is looking for. And those 3 core objectives were chosen because we believe that they're fundamental to an education, but also because they're fundamental to work as well as life. So the question that has arisen from this is, well, since everybody in Texas is expected to address the core issues, then can we simply say that we have identified the marketable skills of communications, critical thinking, and teamwork, and we know those things, and so we are done? I think that what we would hope is that while those are sort of minimal level skills at the division level, that in looking at your programs, you would actually go beyond those and other marketable skills that are embedded in those programs as well.
I'd like to add, though, developing critical thinking after your sophomore year.
Sure, identified as minimal level, right?
Yeah, and they will continue to develop those as they go through. And I think one thing, because we talked about liberal arts earlier, is that marketable skills and critical skills are developed in degrees that have a more clear-cut job market as well, but there's some elements that are missing. I was told by an engineering dean in the past that the one of his graduates at the time was that they could not write an edible memo. They had technical skills, but they did not communicate well. So one doesn't not always think in some of these other fields communication skills as being important. And very often they can make the difference between someone who gets initially and continues to do that job for most of their career versus somebody who continues to rise and be promoted in our organization. These 3 basic skills, that kind of advancement.
At the meeting yesterday where there was the degree communications profile was mentioned, which is a piece of work that has been funded by Lumen and also participated in by AC&U. But essentially, the degree qualifications profile does is try to determine or try to broad skills and knowledge that students should have at the associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree level. And so there was a discussion yesterday about what is the connection between that and marketable skills. And when you look at the degree qualifications profile, it's very broad in nature and tends to deal with what we sometimes think of as being more soft skills than skills. Still important as Dave mentioned that the soft skills, so-called of communications and critical thinking and teamwork are very, very important, and not just something to be learned at a level. And what we would assume is that the learning of these things at the bachelor's degree would be greater and be more in depth than at the associate's level, and we're at the level of the master's degree as well. And institutions that have released these things in terms of general education have also pursued that while they consider competency in the core curriculum at a minimal level at the lower division, they've also these things at the upper division as well, and measure general education outcomes through a person's graduation. And so I also sort of see the same kind of phenomenon going on with marketable skills, that there may very well be at the end of this different levels and degrees of attainment. So.
reminds me that when we were looking at strategic plans for higher education, states that separation between higher education and workforce agencies, and that there's a significant level of communication between those agencies. You may we've had for data with the workforce agency in Texas for many years, but we're developing a much broader relationship now than we had before. And 10 of them, even as we talk about this statewide value group, a learning community, for lack of better terms, develops to see in Amarillo that one of their biggest concerns is not that the business majors coming in and not knowing what you expect a business major to know, but they had a very difficult time interacting with something you think about, or I wouldn't think about, but this bank president felt that because of the advent of technology and communicating through other means, that communicating to one with actual person was a little bit more challenging for students, and he at least was the case. And I hear that a similar from the for the Bank of New York about 4 years ago in terms of the people they hired out of very good schools in the Northeast, very, very technically proficient. They could send email, they didn't email, but text regularly, but they had a difficult time understanding nuances in actual conversations and meetings with people face.
How hard the research is, but there's other evidence that this is a particular problem for millennials. That face-to-face communication is not their preferred method of communication, which in business is not acceptable.
that reflects exactly what this banker in New York was saying, and he said the people he hired were extraordinarily talented, but this one aspect was holding them back.
Envision board meetings of the future, corporate board meetings of the future, when become CEOs, and everything around a conference table, no words spoken, but they will be tweeting and texting each other, carrying their meeting. So
we just asked if the PowerPoint will be available on the coordinating board website. Can you maybe share where we have materials?
We have the draft plan posted on the main website. This PowerPoint in particular is a draft, so we'll be posting resources as they become available, as they're finalized. We will be sharing those. But a lot of this information you can find on our website to the Higher Education Strategic Planning Committee. I could put that on the screen. It might make you a little dizzy, but I can show you where all that information is located. Just go to the site. Under the gap, Strategic Planning Committee, to meeting information, and we've shared with the committee is over the last year, actually, is posted here. And while not in the same single press point as we presented to you here, all the information we've shared with you today is embedded in the information here.
We need to get the information we shared today more readily accessible. I didn't realize it wasn't. But part of this that Ginger's showing you right now is very important, because we've had some terrific speakers from across in the other country, and I think you may want to share some of that, especially if you're developing a plan. We have folks from the Georgia Center, we have someone from OECD, the Aspen Institute, range of folks. Sandy Baum on financial aid. I urge you to look at some of those and feel free to those. If you have meetings, if you think it would be useful, the people who bring to us understood that we would be sharing those videos with other people, and those tend to be about 5 minutes to an hour long on a particular topic. So
we'll to post these materials online from the webinars. We want to thank you for tuning in today. We really appreciate your time. We bet you'll follow up with us if you email ginger.gosselin@tehcb.state.tx.us. Or if you know anyone else at the coordinator and you'd like to send them a note, we'll certainly comment. So thank you, and we'll be hosting another webinar on Thursday afternoon related to student debt. So hopefully we'll hear from you again. Have a good day.